don't unmute. That will, again, keep any distractions to a minimum. So I'm going to turn the meeting over to Rabbi Eisenberg and Rabbi Hirsch, and the two of you know how you want to start. However you want to do this, it's fine. I don't know who's going first.
Okay, well, I'll jump in. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thanks, Carol. It's good to see all of you. I'm very sensitive to Carin's schedule, and we're grateful to Carin Savel for being with us to talk about your experience in Israel on the mission a few weeks ago, your impressions of what's going on now, and I want to thank you for being with us today, but I think it would be important to start off with you, and just in case you have to leave afterwards and get on with your busy schedule for the day. So I'm turning it over to you, Carin. Thank you. You have to unmute yourself, Carin.
Got it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I sound like a commercial.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi. Very kind of you to allow me to go first. And thank you, everybody, for coming today. For those of you that I don't know, and I know most of you, I'm Carin Savel, and I serve as the CEO of your Jewish Federation of Greater Fairfield County. So I'm just going to talk for a little bit about my visit to Israel. And I guess what I want to say is that what makes it special is that we went about a week after the war broke out. We were part of a delegation that was the first American delegation to visit Israel after October the 7th. It was not planned. Jewish Federations of North America frequently do these fly-ins to areas in crisis in the world. And I can tell you that for me, I had gotten previous invitations to go to Ethiopia, and I said no. And I got an invitation to go to the Ukraine, and I said no. And when they called and said, would you like, on a Friday, would you like to go to Israel? I said, absolutely. And by Monday, we were on the flight to go. I was allowed to take one other person. I took my board chair, Mindy Siegel. I don't know if any of you know her from Fairfield. And we went. We didn't give it much thought. We also didn't tell our children, I need to tell you. We knew sort of what we were getting into. And we flew out on that Monday and wound up Tuesday afternoon, about noon, and we landed in Ben Gurion. We got off the plane in Ben Gurion, and I'm sure most of you in this room have been to Israel, so you know what a mess Ben Gurion can be. When we arrived in the airport, we were the only plane there. There weren't any other flights. Nobody was flying into Israel. The airport was completely empty. I took a lot of pictures in the airport. It looked like a movie scene to me. There was nobody there. There was nobody at immigration. There was nobody anywhere. So we had diplomatic entrance because of who we were. We came from federations all over the country. We were just the lucky ones, or the first group that went. So we were here from Connecticut, Birmingham, Alabama, Detroit, Michigan, and Baltimore, and in California and Chicago. And those were the federations that went. And there were one of two people from each of the federations. So when we were ushered out of the airport to get into our transportation to take us to Jerusalem, the first thing we noticed when we got out into the open was the smell in the air. Been to Israel many times, and it smelled like sulfur. And it's the smell of bombs, and I'd never smelled that before. So they sort of hustled us into the car very quickly. And we got into Jerusalem. And the second thing we noticed, because we got there around, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the morning. And we came into the Hotel David Citadel, and we had 14 rooms between the groups, and we were the only people in the hotel. There was nobody in the hotel. Every room was vacant. And when we pulled up in Jerusalem, again, understanding that it's 4 o'clock in the morning, but still there were no cars. We went to sleep. We woke up at about 11 o'clock. And the first thing we noticed was the silence. There was no traffic. There was no horn beeping. There were no people walking on the street. This was a Jerusalem I had never seen. So I want to backtrack and tell you just for a brief thing that the story I'm going to tell you is very different than how Israel is now. We were there a week and a half after the war started. Things are drastically different. But when we were there, they brought us there as Jews to bear witness to what had happened to our beloved Israel. And I can tell you that from the moment we got there to the moment we went home, two things were incredibly apparent. The first is that Israel was broken. I'd never seen Israel broken. I'd never seen its people broken. And the second thing is that they were so happy that Americans were coming to Israel. They were so happy to see us there. So we started out on the first day we were there at about noon, 1 o'clock, and they brought us immediately into a shelter where a lot of our meetings were, because they couldn't really tell what was going to happen. And we got briefed on the things we were going to be doing and seeing. All of this was predicated on what was going to happen security-wise. We were heavily armed. We had armed guards inside of the bus, and we had a car driving in front of the bus. And interestingly enough, for the small amount of people we had a huge bus, and they had half of us in the back by the door and half of us by the front in the door. So there was nobody riding in the middle of the bus. And so we were taught at the first briefing who we would be hearing from, who we would be talking to, and we were given our security orders, which entailed what to do if we should come under rocket fire. So we left out of there and we immediately went to the Israel Trauma Coalition, where it's in a hotel actually, where we met with evacuated families who had been living in the kibbutzim when Hamas came, and they were the ones who had gotten away. And I had a long conversation with a woman named Leora, and Leora, her entire family was there. They heard Hamas coming. They heard the bullets. You know, they all are trained specifically get into the safe room. But an interesting thing, which I'm sure you know about already, is that not every place has a safe room to go to. I mean, it's just not every place has one. And so Leora took her husband and their 2 children, and they did what you're not supposed to do. They ran for their car, and they got into their car, and they drove and they drove. And by then, Hamas had not gotten there in cars. They were there on motorcycles. And so they avoided that, but they ran right into the IDF on the street, on the road, and it was impossible for them to let the IDF know that they were Israeli, that they were Jews, because that's the part of, I'm sure you've read this, that part of what was going on with Hamas is that they were dressed like IDF soldiers. And so they stuck their rifles into the car. And when they finally figured out after about 15 or 20 minutes that they were Israelis, they took them and put them in this hotel. There were 500 families living in this hotel that did not have 500 rooms. Some of the things that Leora told us that day, what it's like to wake up every morning, not have your own clothing, not have your own food, not have your own home. I mean, they left everything behind. She was the first person to tell us the difficulty of mental healing. This was the first time we heard it, and this was the ongoing thread the entire time we were there, was mental illness was the #1 thing that was plaguing the Israelis. Even more so than the physical wounds were the mental wounds. And after we met with Leora for a while, by the way, for someone like me, I need to tell you that who don't know me, I'm first generation born American, and I'm from a family of survivors. And my current survivors, my whole family lives in Tel Aviv. They're all there. And so going back and seeing, and I couldn't see them. That was the first time I'd ever been to Israel where I couldn't see my family. And they're on the front now fighting. So when we talking to her, the understanding of this displacement, by then there were 200,000 people that were completely displaced, and the Israelis were putting them into hotels. And when I say the Israelis, I don't mean the Israeli government. That was the other thing that became very clear, is that the Israeli government was nowhere. It was nowhere. I mean, they were absent, and we were told over and over again that we are a country that was being run by its citizens. This is their language, not mine, and we're doing a damn good job of it. And that's what the citizens would tell us over and over again. So we finished talking to Leora, and we had a brief meeting with a young IDF soldier who came dressed in his uniform with his machine gun to talk to us about what he had seen. And that was at the first moment that we kind of broke, because he was almost unable to talk to us. He was unable. He was crying so badly. And he said, what you have to understand is that the first thing you have to do, the first thing you have to fix are the first responders. We are not trained to witness what we've witnessed. I'm going to not be graphic in this talk by the things that he said to us. But what he told us in general was the things that they saw when they finally could get into the kibbutzim, the things that they witnessed. They were never trained to witness these types of inhumanity. They were not trained for this. And so in the middle of his talk, with his tears going down his eyes, he said, I have to go to the front. He was called to duty in tears. So we spoke to a few other people that were there, and there were many people there. And the displacement, we saw a young girl celebrate her 8th birthday, who clearly couldn't figure out what she was doing in the hotel. And one by one, everybody, I think that's what kept us going. Everybody came up and hugged us, people we didn't know, to thank us for being brave enough to come to Israel. By the way, we didn't know we were brave. We just went. And we left out of there and we returned to Jerusalem, and we visited some of the systems that had been set up by civilians, by the way. And there were some IDF in there, but we went to Magen David Adom in Jerusalem. We saw their main station, and we saw the ambucycles, and we saw the ambu cars who were getting into the places where they couldn't get in. But again, we were told that these are young people that are manning these huge computer monitors to figure out where to go next and how to help next. And they're 18 and they're 19 years old, and they're not trained for war. Magen David is a relief agency. It is not a war agency. And so they were all working 24 hours a day to try to get to the help, but nobody, again, was helping them. We saw this over and over and over again. We left out of there. We took a brief stop into United Hatzalah. These are all agencies, I'm sure you know this already, that the Federation heavily supports. So we wanted to come in person to say hello. And then we went to an incredible place called, it's new, it's called the Jerusalem Civic Command Center. It's right in the heart of Jerusalem. It's a made-up name for a made-up building. This is a theater, like you would go to buy theater tickets. And it was actually, all federations have sister cities, and in our area in Fairfield County is the Afula Gilboa region. But in New York City, UJA, their sister city is Jerusalem. So years ago, they had funded the building of this beautiful theater, which had been turned into this civilian supply center and run completely by civilians, called the Civil Command Center. These were 18, 19, 22-year-olds. They had floor after floor after floor of supplies. One floor was military supplies. One floor was baby supplies. Everything from breast pumps to baby food to baby clothes. The next floor was all food. And the next floor was all clothing. The place was packed with people and volunteers. You don't pay anything. You go in, you tell them what you want, and they're leaving with all of these goods. And somewhere in there, we met the guy that runs the theater, like the artistic director. That's his regular job. And he was talking to us, and he said, in all of my years as a theater director, I can tell you that by far, this is our best production yet. And I want to say that the volunteers that were there, that were giving out the food and giving out the supplies, we had a chance to talk to them, ask them what they did in real life. This was extraordinary to me. In real life, they were things like shop owners and teachers, and they did all regular jobs. And I said, how are you supporting yourself? They said, we're all being paid. The teachers are still being paid as teachers, and the shopkeepers are still being paid. They're being paid by the people that initially hired them to go and volunteer so that they didn't lose money for their family. This civilian chain of help was just extraordinary. Anyway, we went to sleep that night in kind of shock, but we also went to sleep knowing that the next day was going to be terrible. And it turned out to be much more terrible than we ever thought it would be. We began our next morning going to the Knesset. The Knesset was empty. I've been to the Knesset many times. It's bustling. You have to wait on lines. You searched for security. We literally walked in with our armed guards because there was no one else there. And we met with the families of the hostages. And no hostages had been released yet. Nobody had heard anything from the hostages by then. We met with a woman whose sister had been taken. She was 65, 68 years old, and she was the big babysitter of the kibbutz. You know, when the mothers would go to work, everybody would leave their babies with her. And that's how they got a lot of these babies. They took her and they took the children. And her sister and her sister's husband talked to us about what happens to a human being when you have somebody plucked from your family. And they quickly moved on to a young man named Gili, who we all became friends with. And he had been on the phone with his sister in the Ashkelon region, in the kibbutz there, and had been and the funny things you remember when you have a tragedy strike, that he'd been on the phone with her and he was chiding her about buying too many teddy bears for the kids. And in the middle of the sentence, she was shot in the head and she died. And the phone went dead, and her other sister who lived there with them and her husband and their baby ran out and got into their car and ran out, and Hamas picked them all up, got them into the car, and they're driving them away, and they jumped out of the moving car to escape. And they're running, and the sister is running with the baby, and the husband is running, and Hamas is running after them. And she couldn't run as fast as her husband holding the baby. So she gave her baby to the husband, and they ran, and she was captured. So we listened to story after story. So I want to say that last night, we got word that Jordan, the young mother, was returned. And maybe 4 or 5 days ago, this sister, Aviva Siegel, was returned. So those were two rare happy endings. We don't know clearly what shape they're in, but they were returned. But we left out of there asking, you know, what we can do as Americans. They were so happy we were there. They said, I don't know what they think of Americans, but they definitely think we're all on social media, and they definitely think we're emailing people all the time. And they said, use us, use our stories, keep telling people, which is why I keep telling people, because it's not enough to get the information. It's what do you do after you get it? And so we left out of there with more information about what to do when we came back to America. Anyway, we got on the bus, and we could tell by security that something was definitely up, because their phones were blowing up all over the place. And they decided to take us to a different place than they had said was on the itinerary. And by the way, Mindy's phone was being tracked by her kids and her husband. My phone was being tracked by my son and by my Israeli cousin, who was in the safe room in Israel. She's former Israeli intelligence. She was tracking my phone. And they all saw immediately that they were driving us to Ashkelon. We were about 6 kilometers from the Gaza border. By the way, they never did this again with any other visiting troop. So we were 6 kilometers. We were in the Gaza envelope. They drove us right into Ashkelon. And as soon as we got off the bus, we heard the boom, 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 3 in succession of the Iron Dome. And we knew that they had taken care of missiles. And they brought us down. We walked down a dirt road to see where the houses had been destroyed by the missiles. And it was unbelievable. It would be like house, 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 nothing. House, house, nothing. These houses were just, when the missiles hit, there was nothing there. We actually got to meet with one of the people that owned one of the houses that the missile had hit. He had no indoor plumbing. He had no bathroom. He was at a neighbor's house using the bathroom. That's why he was alive when the missile took his house out. So they took us out of that area and walked us into this teen center. It's like a teen command center now, where, excuse me, again, they're giving out supplies, but mostly what they do in this teen center in Ashkelon is pack up toys, something that you wouldn't normally think about, because it's the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids who were displaced, and they were in these little safe houses. We were in a safe room where 100 families were living in this one room, and I'm looking around, it's about the size of my living room. And, you know, we had lunch with some of them, we had lunch with security there, and then they wanted to take us to the Barzilai Medical Center, and we got into the bus, drove to the center, and this is after, if you remember in the news, they were giving Israel a lot of heat because they said they had bombed the hospital in Gaza. So we went to the Barzeli Medical Center in Ashkelon to see that the hospital had been blown up and that it was in two different pieces. And there's a walkway in the hospital. And instead of blowing up the hospital, they blew up the walkway. So they efficiently separated the two parts of the hospital. So that's the bad news. The good news is we were there a week and a half after they had been bombed, and they had already rebuilt it. They had already rebuilt the walkway that went back and forth. It didn't look pretty, but you could go, and the doctors could get back and forth, and they could get to the neonatal unit, which they hadn't been able to get to before. And they had already built underneath the hospital a full surgical unit. So in case somebody blew up the hospital, they could go underneath and actually get the medical care. We spoke to soldiers when they were there. These are IDF soldiers. IDF soldiers act as the Red Cross when they're going into war. And these were 18 and 19 and 25-year-old surgeons. These were surgeons who were out in the field. The one after the other, they got up and spoke to us about what we were doing. We were stunned. Somebody said to me, we used to refer to our young IDF as, as our children. He says, we don't call them our children. They're grown. They're grown men and women. The war grew them. Anyway, we left the medical center. We got back in the bus. We heard a couple of more booms. And they said, we're going to take you back to Jerusalem. This is not a safe area anymore. We have to go. And we started to drive about 5 minutes when we heard the sirens. And we heard 2 sirens, and the security on the bus started screaming at us to get down on the floor in the bus, laying on our stomachs in the bus, which we did. And then the siren stopped. Not more than a minute later, we heard a lot of sirens again, screaming at us, get in the back, get in the front, get out of the bus. We ran across the field to where there was a metal wall. They told us we knew what to do. Get down on the ground. People were pushing each other on the ground, on our bellies, in the mud, face down, with our hands over our heads, hearing the sirens, and then hearing that relief of the boom, boom, booms when the Iron Dome took out the rockets. So we got back into the bus. They hurried us back into the bus. Some people did worse than other people with the incident. Mindy did not do well. She was out there and they had to bring her back in the bus. Some people went into this state of paralysis, and I came back on the bus and sat down, immediately called my cousin in Tel Aviv because I knew she was tracking my phone and I knew she was tracking the bombs. I wanted her to know that, we were okay. And as I was talking to her, I started to cry uncontrollably, just uncontrollably. And I'm apologizing because they live with this every day. And she said to me, don't ever stop crying. She says, that is what makes us human. As Israelis, we know every bomb that goes off, you have to cry because that's what keeps you a human being. So I finished the call with her and I wasn't doing well. So I called my rabbi. I said, you have to talk me down off a ledge. I can't believe what, I don't remember what I said to him, but I know that he spoke to me for 10 minutes. And by the time I hung up, I was better enough to go on, which we did. We were back in the bus. We arrived in Jerusalem, and we arrived at the JDC Center for Trauma. And over again, we had been hearing that the #1 problem was mental trauma. And so we came and we met with people with disabilities, things you don't think about, people in wheelchairs who hadn't left their house in weeks because they don't have enough time to get from wherever they are into a shelter because they're in a wheelchair or they have some other disability. And I think the worst part of that was meeting with the chief trauma counselor to talk to us about what methods they were using with the IDF soldiers and with the civilians. And I can't tell you what those methods were because this man never stopped crying. He cried for 15 minutes, a grown man, that he was not prepared to deal with the type of trauma that he was dealing with. So we left out of there and returned to Jerusalem. And we were I'm going to say, in a fair amount of state of shock of what the day had brought down on us. But I think the Federation knew because we met for dinner, and it was the most extraordinary part of the trip. They separated us into 3 tables for dinner, and at each of our tables we had 4 of us who were there, and then we had a former Mossad official who had re-upped, by the way. They were back in the field doing consulting work, and we had a rabbi at each of the tables. And the rabbi, we had one Reformed rabbi, and we had one conservative rabbi, and then we had one ultra-Orthodox rabbi. And we started off, and they were rotating the tables. We started off with the ultra-Orthodox rabbi. First of all, none of these rabbis had synagogues anymore. They had all been bombed. All those synagogues were gone. But they made the decision that their job as a rabbi was not to minister in a synagogue. And so each and every one of them was now out on the field, and they were ministering to the people that they could find as best they could. And I guess what really shocked us was the ultra-Orthodox rabbi, who, by the way, was sitting at a table with women and eating with us. He said that he had made it his mission to counsel interfaith families during the war. That's an unheard of thing, because they don't even accept the marriage. And that's what he was going. He was going to these small communities and ministering to these interfaith families. Then he got up and left, and the Reform rabbi came, and she sat down, and she said that she also had lost her synagogue and was going house to house, knocking on doors, regardless of faith, by the way, and ministering to people. And I looked at her at one point and I said, these rabbis were broken. You need to know this. I said, who is ministering to you? And she said, we figured that out within the first 3 days, and we no longer go by ourselves. We go in rabbis, pairs, 2 of us, so we can minister to each other. So they finished talking to us, and then they brought a guy in as the final speaker to have dinner with us and talk to us. And his name was Retired General T-Bone, T-I-B-O-N. Some of you can look him up. He was on 60 Minutes. They did a big story on CNN on him. He's known as the Israeli Rambo. And he told us the story. First of all, as an IDF general, the first thing he said was, the government is broken and the IDF is broken. And they all made huge mistakes. And we're going to fix all of these mistakes after we win the war. We'll get to all the bad part after we win the war. And he and his wife were on vacation at the Dead Sea, and they were swimming when he heard the rockets. He heard the sirens going up. So they got back in their car. He's a retired general. He's always armed. And his phone started ringing, and his son was on the phone, and his son lived on one of the kibbutzim. He lived within the kibbutzim, and he called and he said, Abba, the Hamas is here, and I don't know what to do. And he said, go into the safe room. Your father will come and get you. So his son locked the whole family in the safe room, and the general went with his car and his wife right into the line of Hamas fire. And the first thing that they ran across was an Israeli Jeep, where 3 out of the 4 soldiers were dead in the street. And the 4th soldier was wounded with a stomach wound. He said to his wife, you take the car and you take this soldier to a hospital, and I will get to our son. And his wife was yelling, don't come back without our son and their grandson. I mean, they had kids in there. And so this general found a way in there, and he went all the way into the line of fire. He took the machine guns off of the dead soldiers, so he was thoroughly armed, and he went right into the line of fire at the kibbutz, killed, left to the right, walked into the house, knocked on the door, and said, open the door, Abba is here. And he found his son, wife, and their grandchildren, and he saved them all. That was the last thing that we heard when we were there. He was the final speaker, and we were exhausted with what we had seen and what we had heard. But the last thing he said to us is, and we've heard this over and over again, that the United States is the only friend that Israel has, that we are so happy as Americans that you were brave enough to come here. You know, by the time the second day hit, we realized we probably were brave. He said, but you cannot see what you cannot unsee what you've seen. You cannot unhear what you've heard. You need to go back to America and tell the story over and over and over and over, and ask everybody you talk to tell the story over and over and over again to everybody they know, and then take action. And there are many ways to take action. We've been putting these messages out for a very long time. Israel is not a third world country. They're not lacking for anything. They don't lack for food. They don't lack for supplies. They need money to buy them. That's what they need. The number one thing the country of Israel needs is money. And we heard it everywhere, that, you know, people who are good, willing people who are sending supplies, sending medical things, sending army things. He says, it's all well and good. We don't have the volunteers here to unpack your boxes to determine if what you sent is going to be useful to us. Just send us money. We'll buy it ourselves. We'll get it out there. Other things that we've been doing in the community, you might or might not have seen. We're tying blue ribbons around the trees, and each blue ribbon recognizes the fact that we still have hostages out there. When we started tying the blue ribbons, none of the hostages have come home. You know, we have been offering telemed services. This was huge. I just got an email right before this talk from a woman who said, I heard you're seeking therapists who speak Hebrew. She's, I'm willing to volunteer my services. So we hooked her up. She's doing telemed with the IDF soldiers. People are volunteering to go to Israel to do really glamorous things like pick potatoes, like pick vegetables, because the vegetables are dying in the fields because nobody's there to do this now. There are so many ways that you can help as a community support our beloved Israel. And my job, other than running this federation that I'm so proud of what we've done, is to make sure that you know the story, and that you then tell your friends and not just your Jewish friends, that you tell your non-Jewish friends, that we tell as many people as possible that Israel is rebuilding, that Israel is humane, that Israel is strong, is loving, respects human life, but they will do everything in their power to protect their citizens. So I think I've talked long enough. And I guess we'll open to questions, Debbie, if people have
I don't think so, Karen. What I'm going to do, I had a discussion with Rabbi Eisenberg about this. First of all, on behalf of Rodeph Sholom, I can't thank you enough for all you said. I'm sitting here looking at people's faces, and for sure, you made an impact. There is no question about it. And we're very grateful to you and your passion for coming on Zoom to speak to us. What I'd like to do is flip right over to our own Rabbi Nima Hirsch, who is Israeli and has served in the army and has family there and is going shortly, not today, but shortly. And I know that we've all been on tenterhooks waiting to hear from her as to how her mother is, her brothers. So rather than take the time for questions now, I think we'll go straight to Nima. So Nima, where are you? Are you there?
I'm right
You're
here.
there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Carol. And Carin, thank you very much for bringing this heartfelt. And I see many people had tears and very emotional. We really, it was a wonderful eyewitness kind of thing. And so appreciate you giving us this review. I wanted to take it in a different direction, especially because when Jackie cries, you know, I don't know. So I wanted to take it in a more hopeful, in a more encouraging direction, because I am going to Israel. I'm going for Hanukkah. And we all know the story of the Maccabim. And we grew up thinking that we are the new Maccabim, right? And we will win against our enemy. This is our war. This is our time. And, you know, we will rebuild the temple, if you will, the third temple. So in that spirit of the Maccabim, I'll give you a little bit of information of where I grew up. I never really brought up the map, so you know where my kibbutz is. I'll tell you what happened to the people in my kibbutz, where they are, the kind of wonderful things they have done. And then I'll intersperse some of the plans that I have. I'll be there for Hanukkah, obviously, to celebrate the holiday with my family. and to bring money, both from here and from New York, from people that collected money. I'm going to bring it. I'm like Carin. I believe in giving money as opposed to goods and things, because that's really where it's going. So I'll start by doing a little bit of geography. I'll show you where is my kibbutz, where I grew up and where my mother lives. The name of the kibbutz is Saad. It's on Route 25. Route 25 down here gets you to Be'er Sheva. And Route 232 was known during the war. This is the death road. But anyway, we'll ignore it for a moment. So here is Saad in this corner. And here is Kfar Aza, became very famous. It's on the other side of the road is Kfar Aza. This is where I buy gas when I come to the kibbutz from the airport using this road. I buy gas here in Kfar Aza, so I don't really know other people, but I know the kids who work in the gas station. This is Nachal Oz, another kibbutz that was seriously injured. And anyway, this is Gaza City. So as you notice, the road from Saad is here, doesn't go straight into the beach, unfortunately, because Gaza is not a place where we can go to now. Although I'll say after the 6-day war, the road here was open, and we, I think I mentioned it once. After the 6-day war, we went to Gaza, and this is the first time that we were able to buy 7-Up, because the company that makes 7-Up and Coca-Cola did not sell in Israel. We also bought GE products because they had it in Gaza. There was there was the old BDS. Before there was a BDS, there was already Cherem, whatever the word is in English. Anyway, so we went to Gaza. Another time after the Yom Kippur War, one of my friends, Yehuda Weiss, Zichrono Livracha, he died in Lebanon, but in the Lebanon War. But anyway, Yehuda took me after the Yom Kippur War. We went on this road by Nachal Oz. We went to the beach. He had a gun. He had a Kalashnikov, actually, that he got in the war as a booty. I jumped in the water. I swam. We went right out. So anyway, we did it because it was part of our victory lap after winning the Yom Kippur War. So as I said, I wanted to show you, to give you a whole different point of view and kind of encouraging point of view. So this is where I grew up. And this is the neighborhood. This is Kfar Aza. This is Nachal Oz. This is Be'eri. They were all in the news. Here is Re'im. This is what the party was, Kibbutz Re'im. Magen, you know, Kisufim. This is the area that I grew up. Now, the people in the kibbutz today cannot be there, so they were all evacuated to the Dead Sea. So they went to Nevo Hotel Nevo, Dead Sea. And there are 800 members of the kibbutz who are now in this hotel on the Dead Sea. 800 of them, they opened kindergarten and school in the parking lot in tents. They have activities, they have a schedule. They're very tired of being there. They don't love going there, but they're stuck there. They said at least until January, and really there is no return date. But anyway, that's where they are. I'm going to stop this share for a moment, and I'll do another share. You never know how the share works. Okay, so in order to show how grateful they are, how grateful the members of the kibbutz are to Malon Nevo, they did a day where they treated the workers of the hotel to a lunch. Lunch is the main meal in Israel. So members of the kibbutz went into the kitchen, cooked, bought the food, cooked a gourmet meal, created a menu, and then invited all the hotel workers to come in. The people of the kibbutz lined up in the hallway, clapped their hands as all the workers walked in, and then they served them, you know, like waiters, like a wait staff, and they served them. So I'll show you a little bit. It made it to Israeli news. It was quite a thing. So I found it in English here. This is the members of the kibbutz standing and clapping the hand as the workers go in, the workers of Malon Nevo. A little bit noisy here. I'll show you a little bit of that. So it shows you the kind of initiatives and the kind of energy that the members of the kibbutz are displaying. It's quite unusual. Now, I think I did say it last time, but just Carin wasn't here. No, the kibbutz was not invaded. Now it's near Kfar Aza, it's across the street. Kfar Aza got hit very hard. So did Nahal Oz, so did Be'eri, so did the party in Re'im. We don't know why. I did mention that we're religious, but God doesn't work like that. You know, it just happened. It just happened that that a tank showed up and shot some bad guys, and the 12 people in the kibbutz who had guns were up and ready, and they were shooting at some people. Actually, they didn't kill anyone, but they were shooting and threatening, and for some reason the kibbutz was not invaded. Yes, the gate wasn't open, but it's not, they said because it's religious, so the gate wasn't. That's not a good explanation. We don't know why, but the kibbutz was not invaded. And they know, they're very grateful to God for it, and you know, but I don't want to use God as a way to explain why things happen. Now I'll go into what I plan to do. What's going on? They need volunteers. So one of the things that we do in the kibbutz is avocado. So this is an example of some volunteers who put pictures on the kibbutz Facebook. This is the Facebook page of the kibbutz. And they're picking avocado, both in our kibbutz, Kibbutz Saad, and also in Kfar Aza. We have a Google form to fill out before we go. So they sent me the form. I'm planning on going at least one time with my friend in Jerusalem, my high school friend. So we will go together and either pick avocado or may work with the carrots. We have a lot of carrots in kibbutz. It's pretty famous. Lisa probably knows it. Anyway, anyone who's been to Saad. We also have amaryllis. We have amaryllis in the kibbutz, and this was very important in October to mail the bulbs because it's a Christmas flower. And so in October, mid-October, all the Thailand workers went back to Thailand, and many people had to come in and volunteer to wrap up and mail sent out the amaryllis for the season. This is high season for amaryllis. Where is he? This is Shimko, one of the kibbutz members, one of the volunteers. We also have jojoba plant that are growing there. Anyway, so yeah, there's a lot in our. This is one of our kibbutz, Eitan. His name is Eitan. This is one of the kibbutz members who died, so they do that too. He died because he was in Be'eri on that Shabbat, and his name is David Rieder, and he died there. Hashem Yikom Damo, may God revenge his death. So a little bit of that. So I'm flying on Wednesday, landing on Thursday. First candle is Thursday night. I'll be at my brother's house in Holon. He lives in an apartment building like most Israelis. He lives in an apartment. He has, 3-bedroom apartment, small apartment. My mother is in kind of elderly place, in old age home in Jerusalem. And I have a brother in Jerusalem, which was one of the reasons that we decided that will be the best place for her to be during the war. When I talked to my brother, we talked about possibly taking my mother from Jerusalem and bringing her to Holon for next Shabbat, so we can do Shabbat with my brother in Cholon. Now, Cholon is south of Tel Aviv, and they don't have a safe room. When there's a bombing going on toward Tel Aviv, they get some of it. And the only thing they do is they go down the stairs, they walk down the stairs and at the bottom of the building, you know, but it's not really a shelter. So a few days ago, I talked to my brother and we decided if there's a war, I'll go to Jerusalem because Cholon is not safe. But if there is another ceasefire, then we'll spend next Shabbat in Cholon. So these are the kind of things that one has to do. Like Carin said, you went to Ashkelon, but then you had to return to Jerusalem. Was too dangerous. And the same thing with me volunteering. I'd love to pick avocado. I grew up in agriculture. I picked a lot of fruit. We didn't grow avocado when we were children. We had apples and oranges. We had other fruit, stone fruits a lot. But and you know, we had before we had a lot of carrots. We had cotton. We had grapes. We tried to grow a lot of different things. But I would love to go there and help out if it's possible, if it's permissive, if the army permits us to go, and that will be my that's my trip. So I'm basically going to light candles for the whole week and return. I'll return on Thursday at the end of the Hanukkah, and be here the Shabbat after Hanukkah. So that's kind of my plan. What else? I think I talked before about what happened during the war, so I don't need to repeat that. But Carin is still here, I'm still here, and this is the time for reflection. We still have about 10-15 minutes time to ask question and reflect. So, bevakasha, Carol, you want to take it from here? Yeah.
Sure. So if somebody has a question, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. It's just the easiest way to keep this moving efficiently. Anybody? Or are you all stunned?
Carin, do you want to talk about just for a second where the money's going that we donate to anyone donates to Federation for the Sword of Iron, just so we understand what we're donating to?
Sure. Thanks for the question, really. So to date, we raise money cumulatively with the federations across the country, and we have raised $670 million and sent to Israel. It's way over $500 million, which is what our goal was. We're funding approximately 200 agencies on the ground. Some of them you know well, United Hatzalah, Magen David. I can certainly send out all the information, by the way. It's pages, but it's a good read. I guess the most interesting part of this is it's basic needs, it's mental, it's this and that. But last week we got a memorandum that 2 new areas are now being funded. This is aside from the millions going into the hospitals and for medical care. They are now going to be funding millions into mental health care, physical mental health care for the soldiers and for the civilians. The estimation came that there are approximately 1 million Israelis in need of mental therapy. And the second area, which I found really fantastic, is that they're going to be sinking a significant amount of money into helping small businesses stay afloat, so that the country does not go under economically while it's trying to rebuild itself from this war. But there are any number of areas of the Federation. We just sent about $40,000 to the Afula region, which was not bombed, but it's where they moved people to. The people that were displaced, they moved to that area, and there are no safe rooms. And so each safe room costs approximately $10,000 there. So we sent $40,000, and we'll probably be sending more so that they can build safe rooms. So this is very tactical fundraising, but tactical use of the funds. And as I said, they'd be more than happy to send out the whole document of Swords of Iron, where the money is all going. It's been an incredible effort.
That would be.
Yep, if you
that
can
would be
email it
good.
to me, I can share it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm looking to see if we have any other comments or questions.
Chuck.
Chuck. Chuck, you're muted.
Yep,
Okay, now
sorry.
you're not.
Yeah, so I'm curious, Carin. I mean, you mentioned a couple times how during the course of your travels, it was stressed to you that a lot of this effort was not organized or coordinated by the government, that these were individuals or other organizations that did this. I mean, is that, and obviously to a great extent, the Israeli people are very self-reliant people, but I mean, was the intent or were they expressing the fact that the government, not just in the attack, had failed in terms of anticipating, but also in the efforts, or was this supposed to be more of a, we're doing this on our own and the government can take care of what the government needs to take care of?
I think from what we witnessed, and I know that the landscape has changed a great deal because the government is now back up and running and the ministries are in places. Other than the foreign ministry, which was handling the families of the hostages, it was all civilian and volunteer run, and they were very proud about it. They weren't at all concerned. They're Israeli. They just get things done. They weren't going to wait for anybody to come in and figure out how to do disbursement of supplies. These are people that, all know how to do this. By the way, I will tell you one thing interesting. If you remember before the war, when all the talk was about the protests, back and forth, and we saw all that footage, there was one group that emerged there called Brothers and Sisters in Arms. And they were the lead people for the protesters. They morphed right after October 7th into the Brothers and Sisters for Israel. And the same communications modes that they used to get all the information out for the protests, they then used to get supplies out to people who needed them. And so those of you who have been to Tel Aviv and have been to the expo, the big expo in Tel Aviv, that entire building has been taken over. And by the way, I was there when they were protesting that whole building. That entire building has been taken over by Brothers and Sisters for Israel to distribute, not just information, but goods, services, things like that.
You may have, by the way, that Eitan in the kibbutz website, Eitan Herzl was one of the leaders of Brothers in Arms, and he immediately came to volunteer. I showed his picture briefly, Eitan Herzl. But the other thing that came out that was a wonderful change was the Haredim both began volunteering to go to the army, started to cook, went into army camps and tried to see what they can do to help. I mean, they just came out in big numbers. And that was a 180-degree change, because before October 7, there was a plan in the government by the Haredim to have a permanent deferment from the army. And now they're going in large numbers. I mean, not everyone, but still a significant number of them are feeling like this is their country. They have to carry arm and they have to fight. So we have more Maccabim now in our numbers, and that's so encouraging. The fact that and there's another bit. There's a bit of guilt there. I mean, there's so much guilt to go around. While the Haredim were dancing, they were not turning on the TV or the telephone, so they were dancing on Simchat Torah. Okay. They were celebrating Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah. It's one day in Israel on Shabbat. And they were not aware that while they were singing and dancing with the Torah, their brothers and sisters were dying by the thousands. So there's a bit of guilt there that they were not sharing that moment. They were not there, not in the army and not even aware, and so forth. And so there is guilt in other places too. Obviously, there's guilt in the government, in the military. The soldiers were saying, "I'm sorry" to the people that they were rescuing from the kibbutzim because they were not there for them earlier in the day. a lot of that will come later. Actually, it's not completely later. It's already in the paper since the past week already. There's already a lot of accusation going back and forth. Unfortunately, they're not waiting for the war to end before they start all over again with this internal tension and so forth. But I love seeing the volunteers. We all love seeing the people who returned, and there's a lot more that we hope to return. And Carin, you have that red hair, and that's the Jim, you know, the mother with the two little redhead boys, and we all, the whole, everybody's so heartbroken about those kids, you know. So even seeing you with your red hair gets me, you know.
I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Eisenberg, but I'm going to, and then I'll come back to close. Carin, I'm going to ask you a question. This does not require a discussion here, but I have a volunteer for you, a medical volunteer. Can I call you when this is over and give you the information?
If you would send me the via email, I will send you the link to the form they need to fill out in order to do it.
Yep. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, I just got a text while the program was on. Okay. Rabbi Eisenberg, before I close, I'm giving the floor or the screen to you.
Yeah, I'm just going to be brief. I want to thank Carin for taking your time today. I just want to mention that if you recall, during the previous intifadas, the American Jewish community was called upon to provide, in cooperation with Israel and the government, hasbara. Hasbara means explanation. But hasbara also has an aspect of justification to it. In other words, that Israel was called upon to explain and to justify its actions in self-defense to the world during the intifadas. Now this hasbara has reached a level heretofore unknown, really. This is new and it is unprecedented. And I'm going to say something briefly that, again, at the risk of getting a little bit political, but I'm going to say it anyways, as an American Jew, as an American Jewish rabbi. I'm going to say this at the risk of getting a little political because, as many of you know, I'm part-time rabbi at Rodeph Sholom. I'm semi-retired. I've had my career in the full-time pulpit. And if I bother or offend anybody at what I'm going to say, I've had my career. It doesn't matter that much to me. I'm just going to say what I'm going to say. And basically, I don't care. And here's what I want to say. It's very easy for us as American Jews to forget that we are part of a culture that is very different from the culture of the Middle East. And it's important to know that when the media is barraging us and when we're hearing from government leaders about cajoling Israel to act surgically, and that term is being used all the time now, that the IDF is being urged and almost cajoled and almost and pressured to act carefully and surgically in its actions in Gaza, it's easy to forget that that's what Israel does anyways. Israel doesn't need to be reminded of that. That is in the mindset of what Israel does and has always tried to do. At the same time, it's easy for us to forget that while our government leaders tell Israel to act surgically, how effective and successful were we in acting surgically in Afghanistan to root out the Taliban before we then cut and ran so that the Taliban took over and women and girls continue to be trounced upon in terms of their human rights. But we're not the ultimate, we are not the ultimate experts in what it means to act surgically in a military fashion. That's one thing I wanted to say. The other thing I wanted to say, and I'm going to talk about this more tomorrow in my sermon. So come back tomorrow. I'm going to be talking about it in my sermon tomorrow, which is the following. Israel, as we all know, needs to act with strength. Israel was vulnerable and their weakness was exposed. Now Israel must act with strength. That's the way it works in the Middle East. If you don't act with strength, you will be decimated. In the Bedouin culture of the Middle East, if you steal from somebody, they have to steal from you. It's not revenge, it's retaliation. It's acting with strength to defend your security and your interests and your safety. Israel doesn't want to kill innocent civilians. That's the last thing that they want to do. But they must act with strength in that region in order to ensure the safety of Israeli civilians. That is what is needed now, and that is what the world needs to understand. It is a rough neighborhood out there. You can't just lie down and let people walk over you. And to me, I mean, it's almost as simple as that, folks. So I just wanted to say that to you as your rabbi to help continue to keep things in perspective as we keep hearing reports and stories in the media and critiques and criticisms about Israel. We need to stay focused in our own in our own commitment and in our own identity as American Jewish Zionists who are loyal to the Jewish homeland. And I'm done. That's it. I just had to say it.
Okay, then. We won't take any questions. I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to start wrapping it up by thanking Carin and again saying how very lucky we are that you are part of our community. We hope you'll come to Rodeph Sholom again. We have a lot of stuff going on.
In person, right, Carol? Right.
Yes, sir. And we will let you know. You know, I'll let you know because you and I have developed a relationship. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'd say it's our pleasure, but it's more of an honor. So thank you for being here. And Rabbi Eisenberg, I will go out on a limb now that I know Debbie would be saying if she were wrapping it up. God bless you. We are so lucky to have you. And I don't know of another way to wrap this up. You say it like it is. You put it into perspective. You keep us on the straight and narrow. And we couldn't ask for anything more. And I hope people will come tomorrow to hear the second part of your comments. So thank you all for coming.
And Carol, sorry to interrupt, but I am strengthened and supported by Rabbi Hirsch in all of this. Rabbi Hirsch inspires me also to stay strong in my own commitment as a Zionist. And so, you know, we have this partnership that I think must be acknowledged.
Is she your partner in crime too?
But
Do you have two?
You're my partner in crime, but she's my partner too.
Okay.
I'm way farther to the right, but you know, in the spirit of the Maccabim, it's permitted, right?
Well, Nima,
Right.
You are one amazing person and you bring strength to us. So may you go in safety and may you come back to us and
Amen.
Bring us good stories. And we will do these programs again because I think this is the third, if I can count right, if I'm third. Yeah. And as we see a need or if people say, wait a minute, I got to talk, we'll set up a time. Like I said earlier, this is our safe room, to coin a phrase, where you can come, you can talk, you can feel safe, and say whatever you need to say. So with that said, thank you all for coming. Let's stay strong. Let's try to be optimistic, and let's continue praying. So thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Carol.
everybody. Shabbat shalom. Thank you.
Shabbat
Bye-bye.
shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Nima, will you end this because you're recording?